Before he ruled Rome, he broke it, not with an army, not with a rebellion, but with a decision, one river, one step, one act of defiance. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he didn't just start a war. He ended a republic that had stood for 500 years, and the men who helped him rise would soon decide he had become too powerful to live. History remembers the empire, but the empire was born from betrayal. Rome was not supposed to belong to one man. For nearly 500 years, the Roman Republic had survived by one simple rule: power must be divided. 2 consuls, a senate, magistrates, checks, balances, suspicion of ambition. Because Rome remembered something important. Kings had once ruled here, and the Romans had sworn never to allow that again. But republics have a weakness. They work well in times of peace. They struggle in times of chaos. And Rome, in the 1st century before Christ, was drowning in chaos. Generals commanded armies more loyal to them than to the state. Political rivals sabotaged each other openly. Violence had entered the streets of the capital. Ambition was no longer hidden. It was celebrated. And into this unstable world stepped a young nobleman from an ancient Roman family. His name carried prestige, but his fortune was fragile. His enemies were powerful, and the political system he entered was already beginning to crack. Julius Caesar did not create the crisis of the Roman Republic, but he understood something that many others did not. When a system weakens, the boldest man often wins. And Caesar was not cautious. He was not modest, and he certainly was not patient. He believed Rome was destined for greatness. The question was simple: who would lead it there? And if the Republic stood in the way, then perhaps the Republic itself would have to change. History would later argue about whether Caesar saved Rome or destroyed it. But in his own mind, the answer was clear. Rome did not need more politicians. It needed a leader, and Julius Caesar intended to become one. Before Julius Caesar challenged the Republic, he first had to survive it. In his early 20s, Rome was ruled by a dictator, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a man who had seized power through civil war and ruled with brutal efficiency. Lists of enemies were posted across the city, names of senators, nobles, and rivals marked for death. These were the prescriptions. If your name appeared on that list, anyone could kill you and be rewarded for it. Thousands died. Property was confiscated. Families were destroyed. Fear ruled the streets of Rome, and Caesar, young and relatively powerless, suddenly found himself on the wrong side of the dictator. Not because he had raised an army, not because he had led a rebellion, but because he refused to divorce his wife, Cornelia. Her father had been one of Sulla's political enemies. To Sulla, the solution was simple: divorce her, distance yourself, survive. Many young aristocrats would have obeyed immediately, but Caesar did something unexpected. He refused. It was a small decision, but in Rome, small decisions could become deadly. Sulla stripped him of his priesthood, confiscated his inheritance, declared him an enemy. For a time, Caesar had to go into hiding, moving secretly between friends and allies who were willing to risk helping him. Eventually, influential figures in Rome persuaded Sulla to spare the young man's life. The dictator relented, but not without a warning. Sulla reportedly told them, "You have saved this young man, but remember my words, in Caesar there are many Mariuses." It was a chilling prediction because Marius, Caesar's political ally by family, had once shaken Rome with reform and war. Sulla saw something dangerous in a young noble: ambition, charisma, a refusal to submit, and perhaps he understood something that others did not. If Caesar survived Rome, Rome itself might not survive Caesar. Exile did not break Caesar. It sharpened him. After leaving Rome, he served in the Roman military in Asia Minor. For many young nobles, military service was tradition, a step in a career. But Caesar treated it differently. He observed. He studied command. He learned how loyalty forms inside an army, and how power actually works beyond the walls of the Senate. But one event during these early years revealed something deeper about him. On his way across the Mediterranean, Caesar was captured by pirates, not minor criminals, but organized raiders who controlled parts of the sea. They demanded ransom, 20 talents of silver. Caesar laughed. He told them they had no idea who they had captured. He insisted they demand 50 instead. During the weeks he was held captive, he behaved less like a prisoner and more like a guest forced to stay. He wrote poetry, exercised, and even scolded the pirates when they were too loud. He also made them a promise. When he was free, he said he would return and crucify them all. The pirates treated it as a joke. They should not have. After the ransom was paid and Caesar released, he gathered ships, tracked the pirates down, captured them, and carried out exactly what he had promised. It was a small episode in the vast story of Rome, but it revealed the character of the man. Caesar did not forget insults. Ambition in Rome required two things: patience in public, ruthlessness in action. Caesar was learning both. When he returned to Rome, he began climbing the political ladder, one office at a time. Quaestor, aedile, praetor, each position brought influence. Each campaign required money, and Caesar spent it freely. Public games, spectacles, debt piled higher and higher. But Caesar understood something fundamental about Roman politics. Popularity could become power, and if the people loved you enough, the Senate could not ignore you forever. Rome had always feared powerful men, but it feared something even more dangerous: powerful men who cooperated. By the time Caesar reached his late 30s, the Roman political system was already cracking under pressure. Rival factions inside the Senate fought constantly. Generals returned from wars expecting rewards, land, and recognition. Instead, they found resistance and resentment. Two of the most influential figures in Rome stood on opposite sides of this tension. Pompey, the most celebrated general of his generation, and Crassus, the richest man in the Roman world. Both powerful, both ambitious, both frustrated with the Senate. Caesar saw an opportunity. Instead of competing against them, he proposed something radical: an alliance, not official, not public. Pompey would bring military prestige, Crassus would bring unimaginable wealth, and Caesar would bring political skill. Together, They would control Rome. Historians would later call this arrangement the First Triumvirate. At the time, it looked like simple cooperation. In reality, it was something far more dangerous. Three men operating above the traditional limits of the Republic. With their support, Caesar secured one of the most important commands in the Roman world, governor of Gaul. To many senators, this looked like a temporary appointment, a distant frontier, a place where ambitious politicians could spend a few years away from Rome. But Caesar understood the real potential. Gaul was vast, rich, and full of tribes that Rome had not yet fully conquered. If he succeeded there, he would not just gain wealth, he would gain something far more valuable, an army loyal to him. And in Rome, loyalty backed by soldiers could change everything. The Senate believed they were sending Caesar away. In reality, they were giving him the opportunity to become unstoppable. When Caesar arrived in Gaul, he did not find peace. He found opportunity. Gaul was not a single nation. It was a vast land of tribes, alliances, rivalries, and shifting loyalties. Some tribes feared Rome, others hated it. Many fought each other as often as they fought outsiders. To Caesar, this fragmentation was not a problem. It was an advantage. War in Gaul began with what looked like a defensive campaign. Migrating tribes were moving toward Roman territory. Caesar presented himself as Rome's protector, but the conflict quickly expanded. Year after year, Roman legions marched deeper into the forests, mountains, and rivers of northern Europe. Battles were brutal. Sieges were relentless. Entire tribes were defeated. Caesar was not only a commander, he was also a master of narrative. Every campaign was recorded and sent back to Rome. His reports described victories and dangers. The Roman public followed the wars almost like a story unfolding, and the hero of that story was always the same: Julius Caesar. His soldiers began to see him not just as a general, but as a leader who shared their hardships. He marched with them, ate with them, fought beside them. Loyalty deepened. Victory followed victory. But Gaul would not fall easily. Eventually, resistance united under one man, a young Gallic leader named Vercingetorix. For the first time, many tribes of Gaul began to fight together. The final confrontation came at a place called Alesia. Caesar's army surrounded the city, but soon another army arrived, determined to break the siege. Suddenly, Caesar was trapped between two enemies, one inside the walls. Many Roman commanders would have retreated. Caesar did the opposite. He built two walls, one facing the city, one facing the incoming army. And when the final attack came, Rome held, Alesia fell, Gaul was broken, and Caesar returned not just as a successful general, but as the most powerful man in the Roman world. Victory in Gaul made Caesar powerful, too powerful. For nearly a decade he had commanded armies, won battles, and expanded Roman territory. His soldiers were loyal, his reputation enormous, his political influence growing with every victory. But in Rome, success created fear. Many senators had once supported Caesar, now they feared him, because Roman tradition was clear. A general could command armies outside Italy, but he could not bring those armies into Rome. That boundary was meant to protect the Republic, and the river that marked that boundary was small, almost unimpressive. The Rubicon, in 49 BC, the Senate issued a command: return to Rome and face possible prosecution for his actions during the wars. To Caesar, the message was clear: return as a private citizen and face political destruction, or resist. Most men would hesitate. Crossing the Rubicon meant civil war. It meant fighting fellow Romans. It meant destroying the political system that had governed Rome for centuries. But Caesar was not most men. On a cold January night, he stood with his soldiers near the small river. The decision was simple, but irreversible. Step forward, and Rome would change forever. According to later accounts, Caesar paused only briefly. Then he spoke words that would echo through history. The die is cast. And with that, he crossed the river. The moment his army stepped across the Rubicon, the Republic entered a new era, because from that point forward, there was no turning back. Rome would now decide its future. On the battlefield, once Caesar crossed the Rubicon, war became inevitable. Rome was no longer divided by politics. It was divided by armies. Many senators fled the city, joining the one man they believed could stop Caesar: Pompey. Now his greatest rival, Pompey controlled powerful legions and vast territories in the eastern provinces. The Senate declared him defender of the Republic. To them, Caesar was no longer a politician. He was a threat, but speed was Caesar's greatest weapon. Before his enemies could fully organize, he marched south through Italy. City after city opened its gates, not through violence. Many Romans feared civil war, but many also believed Caesar would win it. Pompey made a strategic decision. Instead of fighting immediately, he withdrew east to gather a larger army. For a moment, it appeared the conflict might slow, but Caesar refused to allow that. Within a year, the two greatest generals of Rome stood facing each other. Their armies met in Greece, at a place called Pharsalus. Pompey had the advantage: more soldiers, more cavalry, and the support of many senators. But Caesar's legions had something else: experience, discipline, and loyalty to the man who had led them through years of war. The battle was fierce, but when the moment came, Caesar's veterans broke the enemy lines. Pompey's army collapsed. The general who had once dominated Roman politics fled the battlefield. Soon after, he would be murdered in Egypt. Caesar had not just defeated a rival, he had defeated the last military force capable of stopping him. The civil war was not completely over, but the outcome was becoming clear. The Republic had lost control of its future, and Rome was beginning to belong to one man. When Caesar returned to Rome, he did not return as a citizen. He returned as the most powerful man in the Roman world. The civil war had destroyed the old balance of power. Pompey was gone. Many of Caesar's enemies were dead or had fled across the Mediterranean. The Senate still existed. The Republic still had its institutions. But everyone understood something had changed. Power now flowed in one direction: toward Caesar. At first, he acted carefully. He offered pardons to former enemies, restored some political offices, spoke publicly about stability and reform. To many Romans, exhausted by years of conflict, this felt like relief. Caesar also began a series of reforms. He reorganized debt, expanded citizenship in Roman territories, improved the calendar, creating the system that would later become the Julian calendar. Cities were rebuilt, veterans were settled on land. The state began to function again. But while Caesar spoke the language of reform, his authority continued to grow. He was named dictator, then dictator again. Eventually, the Senate granted him a title that alarmed many Romans: dictator for life. In a republic built on the fear of kings, that phrase carried dangerous meaning. Statues of Caesar appeared across the city. His image was placed on coins. He sat on a golden chair in the Senate. Small changes, but symbolic ones. To Caesar's supporters, this was the reward for victory. To his enemies, it looked like the death of the republic. And inside the Senate, a quiet realization began to spread. If Caesar remained alive, the old Rome would never return. And so a group of senators made a decision, not about politics, but about survival. Because sometimes in history, power grows so large that men begin to believe only one solution remains: remove the man. The conspiracy did not begin with hatred. It began with fear. Many of the men who would later raise their daggers against Caesar had once supported him. Some had fought beside him in earlier political struggles. Others had even received his mercy after the Civil War. But power changes the way men see the future. And inside the Senate, a growing number of politicians believed Rome was approaching a dangerous point. If Caesar continued to rule, the Republic would become a monarchy. And Romans had sworn centuries earlier that they would never again accept a king. Among the conspirators were two names that history would remember forever: Cassius and Brutus. Brutus was particularly important. Not only was he respected in Rome, he was also someone Caesar trusted. To many conspirators, his presence would make the plot appear noble rather than personal. Their plan was simple: strike quickly, strike together, and restore the Republic before Caesar could respond. The date was chosen carefully, March 15th. On that morning, Caesar entered the Senate chamber. He had been warned that danger was near. Some friends urged him not to attend, but Caesar dismissed the warnings. Inside the chamber, the conspirators gathered around him. At first, it looked like a petition. Then one senator grabbed his toga, another drew a dagger, and within seconds, chaos exploded. Blades flashed, voices shouted. Caesar struggled to defend himself, but the attackers surrounded him. More than 20 wounds were struck. According to later accounts, when Caesar saw Brutus among the attackers, he stopped resisting, and the most powerful man in Rome collapsed at the base of a statue. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic, but history would soon prove something they had not understood. Removing Caesar would not restore the old system. It would destroy what remained of it. The men who killed Caesar believed they had saved Rome. They were wrong. Within hours of the assassination, confusion spread across the city. The conspirators expected applause. Instead, Rome fell into silence because the republic they claimed to defend no longer truly existed. Caesar had changed it too deeply, and his death created something even more dangerous: a vacuum of power. Very quickly, new leaders began to rise. Mark Antony, a loyal supporter of Caesar and a powerful political figure, and a young man almost no one expected, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. At only 19 years old, he inherited not just Caesar's name, but also his ambition. The conspirators had removed the man they feared, but they had not removed the forces he had unleashed. Civil war returned to Rome once again. Armies marched, alliances shifted, friends became enemies, and within a single generation, the Roman Republic finally collapsed. In its place rose something new, an empire. Octavian would later become Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and the political world Caesar had begun to reshape would become permanent. For centuries, emperors would rule Rome, but Caesar's influence was not only political. His reforms changed administration, citizenship, and time itself. The calendar introduced during his rule became the foundation of the modern calendar used across the world today. Yet the greatest legacy of Julius Caesar may be something more complex. He revealed a truth that appears again and again throughout history. When a political system weakens, ambition finds a way through it. Caesar did not simply conquer Gaul. He conquered the limits of the Roman Republic. And in doing so, he ensured that Rome would never be the same again. 2,000 years have passed. Empires have risen, empires have fallen. But the name Caesar never disappeared. It became more than a man. It became a title. The Roman emperors used it. Centuries later, rulers across Europe adopted it. Kaiser, all derived from the same name, Caesar. Few individuals reshape history so deeply that their name becomes a symbol of power itself. Julius Caesar was one of them. He did not live to see the empire that followed him, but the world that emerged after his death was built on the path he opened. And history still asks the same question: was Caesar the destroyer of the Republic, or the architect of Rome's greatest age? Perhaps the truth is simpler. He was both. And that is why the story of Julius Caesar is not only about Rome, it is about power, ambition, and the moment when one man decides that history itself can be changed.